Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Aboim. We have three very interesting Shiurim today. Let's begin. Davar Yafeh be'itai. I have a very exciting announcement. Be'ezus Hashem, Art Scroll is beginning a great project. They're going to be translating some of the Svarim into now Spanish and French. So, if you would like to participate, let me know. Okay, so let's start with Davar Yafeh be'itai. Here we go. Parshas Vayechi. So first of all, the objective of this shir, the objective of this limud, is to connect the parsha to the Zman of the Shana. So one interesting thing is that Chodesh Teves, which is always when we read Vayechi, the Sefer Yetzirah writes, is connected with the letter Ayin. Ois Ayin. The lashon of the Sefer Yetzirah is Hashem was Himlich Ois Ayin Beroiges. He coronated the letter Ayin Beroiges, in fierce anger. Now, there are a lot of connections to the Ayin in Parshas Vayechi. First of all, Rashi says it's a Parshas Sesuma, which means the eyes of the Jewish people were sealed shut. So that means in this month, we see that this month created with the ayin is associated with the power of the eye. It's a month where the eye was sealed shut. But furthermore, when Yaakov Avinu davened, Lishuascha kivisi Hashem, like we learned on Wednesday night, the reason he offered that prayer is because he prophesied that they would poke out the eyes of Shimshon. There's also a big ayin in this week's parsha. Anybody know that? There's a big ayin in this week's parsha. You say, what? Where's there a big ayin? It's hidden. Where is it hidden? Because we know that when Yaakov was on his deathbed, he was going to tell his children when the Geula would happen, and he was not able to. He was unable to. Therefore, the Gemara in Pesachim says on Daf Nun Vav, the children said to Yaakov, Shema Yisrael, listen up, Yaakov. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Don't worry, we believe in one God. So that means hidden in this week's parsha is Shema. Now the Shema has a big ayin. How appropriate for the month of Teves, which was created with the ayin. Also we have the pasuk Ve'enei Yisrael Kavdu Mizoiken Lo Yuchal Lirois. So that could be explained as follows. We know there's a principle of Chasam Sofer that a person has two sets of eyes, physical eyes and spiritual eyes. And the more one closes their physical eyes to the temptations of this world, the more their spiritual perception opens up. So Yaakov Avinu got old. He couldn't physically see. But the implication is his spiritual capacity increased and he was able to see the future, which is why he was able to give blessings to all of his children. Now this month is associated with roigez, anger. Therefore, perhaps we read in this week's parsha, Yaakov Avinu says, "Cursed is their anger." The Targum translate rugzahain, roigez, to keep roigez in check in this month. Now I want to share with you something really out of this world. This is something we've spoken about in the past, but we need to put into focus and we need to add a detail or two. Mar Rabbi say, it's really, we see wonders from the Torah that a good chunk of this week's parsha occurs in the month of Teves. Say, what? How could that be? How did this week's parsha occur in the month of Teves? Very simply. Does anybody know what day of the year does Yaakov Avinu pass away? Yaakov was born on Sukkot. The Torah writes in Simon Taf Yud Zayin that the Yom Tov of Sukkot is Keneged Yaakov Avinu. And Yaakov Avinu died on the first day of Sukkot, and therefore let's make a simple cheshbon. They embalmed Yaakov for 40 days and they cried for him for 30 days. Then they buried him. So that means they buried him 70 days later. 70 days after the day that he died, on the first day of Sukkot, is Chanukah. Yaakov Avinu was buried on the first day of Chanukah. Now, I always assumed that they mourned him for 7 days after. And then Yosef, the brothers saw that Yosef was not really friendly to them as he once was. So Yosef consoled them. If Yaakov was buried on the first day of, if Yaakov was buried on the first day of Chanukah, that means his Avelus was up on the 7th day of Chanukah, which means that Yosef consoles the brothers on Zois Chanukah. That means that happened, Zos Chanukah is Gimel Teves. So the end of the mourning for Yaakov Avinu and the consolation that Yosef gives his brothers happened in this month, in the month of Teves. But I think we could say even better, and you'll see. Because one thing I always forgot about is that how long does it take to get from Ma'aras HaMachpelah back to Egypt? The Ramban says 8 days. So they didn't return back to Egypt until the final day of Chanukah, which is, of course, the month of Teves. But now I want to share with you something amazing. If you look in the drashos of the Chassam Sofer, and I saw a number of these drashos quoted in the Sefer Das Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer writes about this in a number of places, but Chassam Sofer says, actually, and I don't understand this, but the Torah says that they mourned for Yaakov before they buried him. If you look in the Psukim, it says Yosef mourned for Yaakov. That means they mourned for him at the end of the 70 days. So they embalmed him for 40 days, and they cried for him for 30 days, which means that period was over on the first day of Chanukah, but not actually they buried him on the first day of Chanukah. Then they first had to leave Egypt and go. They had to leave Egypt and go to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. So the Chassam Sofer says a cheshbon like this: when the 70 days were up, then they mourned him. So they mourned him from the first day of Chanukah until the 7th day. And then, now the 7th day of Chanukah takes you to the 2nd day of Teves. The Ramban says it then takes 8 days to travel from Egypt to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. That means Yaakov Avinu was buried on Asara B'Teves, the Chassam Sofer says. You hear the cheshbon? It's 70 days from the day of his Petira, and those 70 days end on the first day of Chanukah. They then mourn Yaakov Avinu for 7 days. That takes you to the 7th day of Chanukah. It takes 8, that's the 2nd day of Teves. It takes 8 days to get from Egypt to Israel. It takes 8 days to get from Egypt to Israel. It takes 8 days to get from Egypt to Israel. So that means Yaakov was buried on Asar B'Teves. Now listen to this. Who was killed on that very day? Esav. That means Esav was murdered on Asar B'Teves. Maybe that's why Asar B'Teves, that's like a remez that Asar B'Teves will be overturned to a day of joy, because our arch enemy who tries to destroy us, he was killed on Asar B'Teves. Now, let's take this further. That means the burial of Yaakov Avinu and the dispute with Esav all happened on Asar B'Teves. Now do you understand why we read Vayechi now, this week? But moreover, it's the dating is even more precise, because they had to first come back to Egypt. It took another 8 days. So that takes you to the 18th day of Teves. So the whole end of the Parsha takes place in the month of Teves. Now, that's really an amazing idea. Now, by the way, listen to this cheshbon. Okay, you ready for this? This occurred to me last night. That means they embalmed Yaakov Avinu and they cried for him for 70 days. They mourned for him for another 7 days. 77. Then it took 8 days to get to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. 8 days, a total of 85 days. From 85 days, from Chanukah, from Sukkot until Asar B'Teves. it comes out, friends. Does anybody know how many psukim are in Parshas Vayechi? There are 85 psukim. There are 85 psukim in this week's Parsha. Perhaps it corresponds to the 85 days from the death of Yaakov. 70 days of mourning and embalming, 7 days of mourning, and 8 days of travel. It's exactly 85 days. It's pretty amazing. Now, it comes out Esav was killed on Asar B'Teves. So my friend Rabbi Eliezer Levi pointed out, it's very interesting. We learned that the month of Teves belongs to Esav. And the Munkatcher would say that this month, it's like a month that's predisposed to challenges for the Jewish people. The spiritual forces of dogs are prevalent in this month. And throughout history, the Bnei Esav have tried to abolish the charity of Reb Meir Baal Hanes. But maybe now we could explain, because Reb Meir was the spark of Kedusha in Esav. We know that Reb Meir came from Esav. The reason why Esav's head was buried in the Maras HaMachpelah is because Rabbi Meir was in his mouth, so to speak. The Arizal says the soul Rabbi Meir was in the mouth of Esav. That's why Esav's head was buried in the Maras HaMachpelah. That's the reason why the festival of the Gentiles of December 25th is in the month of Teves. Teves belongs to Esav. In fact, the Munkatcher would always show his friends and his associates how decrees against the Jewish people historically have often been promulgated in Teves. And the Munkatcher was happy when the month was over. So my friend Rabbi Eliezer Levi pointed out, maybe the reason why Esav was killed in Teves is because this is a month that's destined to return to us. So sort of Esav was uprooted in the very month of his power. And who killed Esav? He was killed by Chushim ben Dan. Dan, according to the Shari Oira, the month of Teves belongs to the Shevet of Dan. According to Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, it belongs to Yehuda, but the Gemara says Yehuda killed Esav. Tosfos brings down that Yehuda killed Esav. And one interesting little tidbit is this is something we once spoke out from Rav Moshe David Valley at length, but it's sourced in the Arizal, that Yeshu HaNoitzri, Yeshu was considered a reincarnation of Esav. And Yeshu was born in this month, and perhaps that's why Hashem, so to speak, was mavatel him by having Esav killed in the month of Teves. Be it as it may, if you actually, based upon the Chassam Sofer, a very, very significant part of our Parsha, if not the entire Parsha, is occupied. It takes place in this very month, and therefore, how Yafeh B'ita it is to read about the burial of Yaakov Avinu in the month of Teves. Okay, that's the first offering for today.